Good afternoon. I'm Ken Cross, and I'm running for the office of President of the United States. The topic of today's video is saving Social Security. First, there are many who believe that Social Security shouldn't be saved, but rather replaced by some other program or type of savings for people when they mature and get older. I do believe that Social Security should be saved, and here's why. People tend to spend, not save, as they go through their earning years in life. Tend to buy a little better house, a nice car, travel, have dinners out, and not prepare adequately for their finances in their later years. Uh, they need to be able to be confident that they're going to have income security and they're going to have a income protection for when they get older, and Social Security is a good program to accomplish that. Uh, when workers work, they contribute 6.2% of their earnings to the Social Security program, and that 6.2% is matched by employers. That essentially is a 100% return on investments in retirement. In the stock market, the returns are much less than that these days. They rarely hit 100% in the course of a year, and some are actually losing money. So if the money is there, you know it's going to be there, and you know it's going to grow. And that 100% would not be there. Some argue that employers, if they didn't have to match the 6.2%, would pay higher wages. But I've run many businesses, and I can say that's not what motivates owner to pay higher wages. Owner pays higher wages based on whether they think their employees will be looking elsewhere for work. They reward the good ones based on their performance, and they tell by the market on what it takes to hire somebody new in, what they have to pay them. In times that are good or bad, corporations look at things like investment, stock buybacks, all sorts of other uses of funding for their monies, and they don't say that they're just going to have 6.2% raises just to do so. So, for that matter, if you consider if you're a worker out there now, are you getting 6.2% pay increases year after year at the present time? Probably most of you are getting what the inflation rate is, or at or near a couple percent. So you get a lot of return on money that you put in by the fact that the employers are matching that amount into the Social Security program for return back to retirees and survivors. Um, Another reason that I support saving and strengthening Social Security is that we don't want to have in this country what we had when Social Security was established, and that is a lot of elderly people literally starving that didn't have children to help care for them, and homeless. Nowadays, the way it is that most of the senior citizens have ability to take care of themselves, they have self-respect, and they have confidence that their finances are in order for them as they get older, and that enables the middle-aged people to focus on their own lives, their partners, their businesses, their children, and they still do, as the baby boomers do now, and as all middle generations do, help their elderly parents by driving them to doctors and so forth. But so far as having to live with younger people, the elderly people largely don't do that. They live by themselves until they're in a position where they can't care for themselves. So Social Security is what has enabled that to happen, and it's a good thing. In addition to Social Security retirement benefits, there are survivor benefits through Social Security. They amount to about 20% of Social Security. And one of those benefits is the benefit of a spouse being able to draw the partner's Social Security when that partner dies. A lot of women, especially, step back from the workforce for windows of time to have children and raise them, or for other purposes. And they are paid anyway in the market, some amount less than men typically. So the Social Security system enables them, if they have a spouse that dies, to have that higher Social Security payment amount than what they would have on their own work effort. In addition, the Social Security system pays a survivor, the surviving spouse, dependent care monies to help raise children that have not reached the age of 18, and that helps significantly. So the person in the Social Security system also has the peace of mind that the individual's partner and surviving children under 18 will be cared for better. So that's another good feature about Social Security. Since 1950, there have been 9 presidents that have raised the percent of money required of the payroll in order to fund Social Security. There have been 4 Democrats and 5 Republicans since then who have raised the percentage of payroll taxes to cover Social Security. You would expect the 4 Democrats, it's a social program, and they often do vote for such things. But when you look at the Republicans, Eisenhower, Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Bush, and you see that they raised taxes for the Social Security system. They could have, and I was alive around in those years, they could have resisted raising the percentage of payroll tax to cover Social Security and push for a privatized system or pushed for lower benefits, but they didn't. And it's a real question of why. I believe the reason why is primarily because even though they're Republicans and many Republicans are are not happy with tax increases, that the 5 presidents who raised the payroll tax percentage were first and foremost Americans and second Republicans. And by that I mean they had tough decisions to make, and they were not timid people. And they looked at the situation and they saw Social Security as a program that was very beneficial to the country. And they took it, sometimes at great political risk, the initiative to raise payroll taxes on Social Security. And I believe that, of course, Ronald Reagan ran a whole platform when he ran about reducing taxes, and he raised taxes. George Bush Sr. raised taxes, and that may have cost him a second term in office, actually, because he had pledged not to raise taxes, that there would be no new taxes. The point is this. Presidents have tough decisions, and 5 out of 5 presidents since 1950 through the 1990s raised the percentage on payroll taxes to enable to support the Social Security program. Now, let's take a look at current status of Social Security as it exists right now. The 2015 annual report by Social Security's Board of Trustees indicated that Social Security has 2 primary sources of income right now. It has the payroll taxes collected from workers and the matching amounts from employers, and it also has interest income from the federal government on the bonds that Social Security holds that were issued for the federal government to borrow money from the Social Security system, borrow the surplus that was being paid in. That surplus, of course, is what was created when Reagan and Bush and the others raised the rate, because the amount then taken in was not only enough to cover the full funding of the payments, but it was substantially more, which built a surplus. The federal government borrowed that surplus and issued treasury bonds to the Social Security Trust Fund, and the federal government is now paying interest on those bonds, which is good, that part of it. So anyway, with the income and the interest, Social Security has no trouble paying full benefits through 2020. In 2010, there wasn't enough income from the payroll taxes to cover the full payments out, but with the interest amount coming in, the two of them were enough to pay the amounts out, and that will continue up into 2020. In 2020, the government will have to issue more in full payments to retirees and Social Security recipients than the payroll taxes and interest will cover. At that time, the Social Security Trust Fund will have to start cashing in the bonds that the federal government issued when they borrowed from the trust fund. They call that redeeming the assets, redeeming the bonds. And during the span from 2020 to until 2034, with the payroll taxes, the interest that there still remains that they get, and by cashing in the bonds, Social Security can pay full amounts until 2034. So for anybody considered about Social Security survival, until 2034, there is no concern from Social Security's perspective. There is a problem for the federal government in that during 2020 to 2034, they're going to have to pay back the 2.7 trillion that they borrowed from the trust fund. And they have to pay that money back, or the trust fund can't make payments. But there's not reason for big concern because the federal government has to pay that money back anyway, or it would lose its credit worthiness and its credit ratings, which would be catastrophic for the world economy. So that will get paid back, and consequently, the Congressional Budget Office has projected that there will be high deficits while the federal government pays that money back. So that I would ask that you look at my federal debt video, and I follow through further on there of the implications. But certainly, we have to avoid plans that candidates offer that cut a lot of revenues when we actually have to have more revenues to pay back the Social Security Trust Fund. One of the concerns of young people has been that there will be no Social Security for them. They're paying in now. They have no faith that there will be Social Security monies for them when they get older. And that's unfortunate, because the current status of the Social Security Trust Fund is that in 2034, they will have redeemed all the bonds. They won't get the bond cash in money, and they won't get the interest from the bonds. But it is projected that the payroll taxes will still cover 75% of the full payment of Social Security until 2089. And we don't desire to cover just 75%, and there are things that can be done, and I'll get to them shortly, that could enable the full payment through 2089. But we're not at a point when the Social Security Trust Fund no longer has the bond assets, that there's no money, because it's a pay-go system, and there will be additional revenues from people paying into the system that cover retirees, just as it's always been. There are several potential measures that can save and strengthen Social Security beyond 2034. First one that I think needs to be done is to raise the retirement age, the early retirement age, from 62 to 64. And when it was 62 and the full retirement was 65, that was a 3-year span. It's moving up towards 67, but the early retirement still at 62, and that 5 years is too great a time frame, and we need to move up to 64 and move the full retirement to 67 and avoid all this month by month calculation, which is big bureaucracy for the Social Security Administration. Very simple, 64 and 67. And the way it would work is at 64, a person would get 85% of their full retirement, 65, 90%, 66, 95, and then they would get the full 100% at age 67. Now, some young people have said, well, that sounds unfair because older people have been able to draw at an earlier age, and now you're saying to us we will have to wait till later to draw. Since the Social Security program was initially established in 1937, the average lifespan has greatly increased. The average lifespan in 1937 was 60 years of age. In 1980, it had risen up to 70 years of age, and in 2016, now it's at approximately 76 years of age. So there has been a 16-year increase in lifespan in the program, but the program hasn't had a corresponding shift in age of available retirement, and therefore the program gets into financial difficulties. Now, some have advocated that the age be moved to 70. I don't think we need to take that great a jump. You can take steps along the way that are helping to reduce the difficulty without having to do everything at once. But anything would be better than nothing, which is what we've gotten out of recent past presidents and recent past Congresses. They haven't even gone to the point of explaining to the people what's going on, but there's a significant financial burden on the federal government to pay back Social Security starting in just 4 years from now in 2020. In addition, another thing that could be done is we could raise the threshold that Social Security payroll taxes apply to from 118,500 to 200,000. And some people are reluctant about that because they will have to pay taxes on more money, and that's understandable. But that additional tax amount that the people would pay at 200,000 would result in higher Social Security checks, for one thing. So it's not just a giveaway; they're getting something for that. But also, the additional monies would help spread out and smooth out the impact of the debt that is owed to Social Security, which would help the country. It is interesting to me and somewhat ironic in that I've talked with some people, blue collar workers, who have said, "Oh, that's terrible, raising taxes, raising the percentage. Raising the threshold." And I said, "No, you don't make 118,000 a year. You probably never will, so it won't affect you financially." So it's interesting that the more wealthy in our society, the upper class, has found some way to stimulate the middle class to do their battles for them. All this is asking for is that some people contribute for a little more of the money they make and to get better benefits. That's not a big request. The people that are millionaires will still only pay on the Social Security amount on money up to 200,000, not the remaining 800,000. And the person that's making this 50 or 60,000 doesn't have the choice to just pay payroll taxes on 20,000. He pays on all of it. So really, it's a reasonable approach, regardless of all of the fervor about raising the threshold. And another way that would work, but not something that I would pursue uh, at the onset, would be to uh, have an increase in payroll tax from 6.2 to 7% that would be matched by employers. Now, I'm not promoting that, and I wouldn't pursue that as president at the onset. But as time goes on, if we saw we needed to do so, it could be done, and then Social Security would be fully funded more nearly to the 2089 window. Only the Social Security Administration, the trust fund, can make those kind of projections. But surely, if we do things that help to extend the life and provide increased income to Social Security in any way, it will have the net effect of extending the window of full benefits. In conclusion, I would say first that Social Security is a beneficial program that should be saved and strengthened. Also, Social Security is not in short-term crisis or difficulty, has ability to pay full benefits through 2034. Also, then the third point is with modest adjustments of some type, Social Security can be, the Social Security problem can be alleviated, and funding would be available at full payments as long as people in the workforce now would likely to live. So anyway, I believe that we need to recognize this and understand the truth, know the accurate true status of where we are and the risk. If there is a risk, it is that the federal government would try to elect to not pay back the Social Security Trust Fund. If they were to not pay back the Social Security Trust Fund, then there would be a shortfall of money to pay Social Security, which would result in reduced Social Security checks as early as 2020. I don't believe that's the situation. I believe the federal government will honor their debt and will pay back the money to Social Security. I believe that Social Security is a program that is solvent and will be strong at least till 2034 and many years after that. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.